Hello, everyone. You've called into the Northern California Judging webinar. Joining me tonight is Carissa, one of our regional judge advisors for the region. So she and Seal, Dr. Craig, and Romy Shields are our regional judge advisors, and they train all of the judge advisors across Northern California. But she's here to answer questions about the judging. I'm going to turn off my camera and give it to her. The way you'll ask questions is you can raise your hand, or there should be a question box and you should be able to type your questions there. We don't have a formal presentation, so if there are no questions, then we'll cut it short. So let's take it away. Over to you, Chris, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name's Carissa, like Jill was saying, and I've been a judge advisor since 2020. So I've kind of gotten a lot of experience with this, but if you haven't taken a look at the rubrics and stuff, they've been updated for this year. So please make sure you go take a look at those. You will get two actual rubrics like what you're kind of used to seeing back. That would be for project and for robot design. And then a judging session feedback form, which is where all the comments will be for all the areas that you typically get comments back for. The core values score is actually now coming from both your project and your robot design. All these little boxes with stars, those rows, that is where the core value stuff is coming from. And then also your gracious professionalism scores that you get during your game runs. So that is kind of the biggest change this year. So hopefully you take a look at that and kind of understand those things. Otherwise, the judging session pretty much remains the same. But instead of that 3-minute core values Q&A, they get a little bit more time to do feedback for the final share from the judges. So I guess those are the biggest changes for judging. Does anybody have questions?
And again, for those joining, the way to ask questions is you can raise your hand. So if you're on mobile, for example, that may be the only option for you. Or there should be a question box if you're joining from a computer. And I see a hand raised, so I'm going to unmute, I think it's Jaya Bhatia. Let me unmute you. And you will have to unmute yourself as well, and you'll be able to ask your question. Go ahead.
Thank you for setting up these sessions. Just one quick question. At the end of the 2.5-minute mark, does the robot have to be back in the home bases for the missions to be marked complete?
That would be a referee question. I don't know that.
Yeah, so we held our robot game webinar last week. I suggest listening to that webinar. It's posted on the resource link on our webpage. So that is a robot game question, not a judging question.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep. If you could, I think you have to lower your hand as well. I don't think it does that automatically. So Shilpa, I have unmuted you. You'll have to unmute yourself and then you can ask your question.
Yeah, hi. My question is, does the team need to have a tripod for innovation project only, or should they have tripods for robot design and core values as well?
That is up to the team. That you can decide however you want to present your project or robot in the way that you guys choose. Just keep in mind that if you do create something, the students need to be able to carry it into the room for the judges to see. And most likely, we will not have projectors or computers or anything like that available for the students to plug into to show the judges anything. You are not required to have any displays or anything like that. That is up to each individual team to decide.
And sometimes actually the rooms are pretty small, so there may not
Yeah.
even be an extra table to set a trifold on. So the kids would end up having to hold it basically in their hands for their entire judging 30-minute session, or at least during that part of it.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
I see some very experienced coaches on today's call. So I find that very curious. So I would love to hear from our experienced judges, coaches as well. What do you want to learn tonight? Like there's nothing magical about it, right? So I'm very curious. You have another question?
Yeah, so you're asking what do we want to learn today?
Yes.
Maybe the rubrics and how you judge for core values, project, and robot design, right? And also, what type of awards do you have? I mean, if the teams don't make it to regionals, do they still win something? Yeah, maybe more information on that.
Yeah, so the awards list is going to also be slightly dependent on the size of the tournament. The smaller the tournaments, the less awards that are typically the less amount of optional awards and so on finalists and stuff like that that we go into. So the required awards that we always give out are the champions, core values, innovation project, robot design, robot performance, which is based off of their gameplay, and then the coach mentor award. So the only one that is decided not by the judging group is the Robot Performance Award. Sorry. The rest of them are decided by the judging group. That includes the Coach Mentor Award. Typically, the JA or the judge advisor reads through the Coach Mentor Awards uh, pieces of paper that get turned back in. For some reason, I'm blanking on words today.
The nomination form. There you go.
That's it. Yeah. So the JA will typically read through those and then sometimes have one of the judges or a couple of the judges also read them to kind of make sure that we pick the best one. As for the other awards, those are all based off of the rubrics, which have slightly changed this year. So please keep that in mind and definitely go take a look at them. We base judging off of what is written on this rubric. So if you read it and then just kind of read across, that is what we're basing all of the stuff on. So as the students are presenting, it's good to kind of make sure they kind of hit these 10 areas for the project. The reason why I know this one is project is because it's blue, robot is green. So it's, if you aren't sure, that's kind of, they color code things a lot for us. We do try to make sure all the judges are on the same basis as to what the 1, 2, 3, and 4 means. So that way everybody gets hopefully the same and an even judging experience. Did I
So
answer
there's
all of your?
Yeah, so I can give you a little bit on the awards. So if you're going to a 12 team, then we'll only give one of each of these. If you're going to a 12 team event, if you're going to a 16 or 18 team event, Then we will add one of the optional awards. I believe we're adding Rising All-Star. And then if you're going to a 24 team event, we're actually adding a second place champions award. So it'll have the Rising Star, all of the required awards, and a second place champions. So that's how the awards will go for the size of event that you're doing. We do have a question in the question box. I don't know if you want to do this exactly, but it says, can you review the rubrics line by line for us? And we want to understand. So I think instead of going line by line, I think maybe take one or two out of each of the 2 pages and talk about, what that would mean. I don't know if we can go line by line. I think that may be a little bit much.
Yeah. Okay, so for this project, if let's start with, sorry, it's a little small for me to read. Let's start with
You should be able to increase it on your side as well, but I'll
yeah.
increase on my side. There we go.
So if we
Is that
start with identify, yeah, we can start with the top there with the identify. So the team had a clear, defined problem that was well researched. That's kind of a baseline of what identify means. And what we're basically looking there for is then that the problem that they chose to work on for their project is clearly defined. We, as the judges, basically, we understand what they're trying to do and what the problem is that they're trying to solve. From there, that second line of that is that their research into that problem shows clearly that they use different sources, whether that's different websites, they went to experts, they went to their teams, or even their parents and friends and neighbors and all of that, that they kind of really went into and looked at different sources for this problem. So that's kind of what we're looking for. And then, yeah, so that one, identify for the problem is fairly straightforward. One of the other ones, if we go on iterate, that one's a little bit, I think, harder sometimes for teams. Is just that iterate, the team shared their ideas with others, collected feedback, and included improvements to their solutions. So for this, we're looking that they shared their solution to their problem with multiple people, not just their, neighbors or their friends or their immediate school, but also with, maybe a few experts in the area that they researched. They reached out to people that maybe are in a community or two over from them to see what they thought of the idea. That they got that feedback, and then they try to make improvements on their current solution. And then we kind of want to see that they're taking those steps to make improvements. I do understand at this time, sometimes those improvements are not quite implemented yet because you're still working through your first sharing sessions or getting it actually started with your solution. So that's understandable, but if you have clear, like, hey, we're getting our feedback right now, and our next steps are this. And then that shows that you're intending to improve, and that gives you better chances at that second line there to have a higher score. Hopefully that made sense.
Great. Yep. And then let's do a couple from robot
Yep.
design.
Okay. Let's see. We'll do some different categories here. Let's look at the design category. So team members worked collaboratively. Oof, tough word today. On their designs and developed the building and coding skills needed. So here with that first line, we're looking that all team members had a chance to actually contribute to the team's ideas of what the robot looks like or how the code works, and that everybody basically got to have a say in it. Now, doesn't mean that their ideas were incorporated or used, but that they had a chance, or they were at least given the opportunity to discuss ideas and pick with the team what the best way to move forward was. And that first line is kind of looking more at the mechanical side of things, but also the second line looks more at the coding side, which is a little bit harder sometimes for some teams where every kid doesn't necessarily have those abilities. But I think this year we actually updated it so it does say evidence of building and coding. So this is, we're looking to see that all the kids actually had a chance to work on the robot, whether that's building a tool for it or getting to write a program for it or both. That's what we're really looking for, is how they designed it and that every kid had a chance to work on it. With the communicate line, let's see, that one's team effectively explained what they learned from the robot design process and celebrated their progress. So here we're really looking for how you went from your first idea of the robot all the way to what you see in the judging room. What does that look like? How did you go from, the base brick module to this thing that has 3 wheels or 4 wheels and has 2 attachments and an arm that does this or that, and how many motors you're using? Like, we really want to kind of see that growth of here's how we got to where we're at today. And that's kind of what that one is how effectively did they communicate their design process to the judges, and clearly showing their enthusiasm and excitement about their work that they've been doing. Hopefully that then answers that question as well.
Yep, and I think it's important to also clarify that although the judges, if you look at the flow chart, there's time for the question and answer. It's really up to the responsibility of communicating and directing the judges so that they can tell that like everyone contributed is on the team. Like the judges shouldn't have to ask the question, did everybody code? What did you do, right? The team should be able to share that as part of their either their explanation on the robot design or their presentation as part of their project, right? So it really, your focus should be looking at how do you present the information that allows the judges to fill out that rubric in the best way for the team that that's possible, and not waiting for that Q&A. But even in the Q&A, the team can sort of segue into like answering questions that aren't necessarily asked. That's a great skill to learn. It's one that you'll use as an adult when you go to interview and you want to share something that they don't know to ask or that they may not care to ask. You kind of have to also kind of lead that interviewer, in this case, the judges, to what you want to share, right? So the team can absolutely say, hey, we'd love to talk about X, right? So maybe in the robot design, if the judges are asking a lot of software questions or coding questions, the team can also say, hey, but we also want to talk about the way we got this design the way it is, right? So the team can absolutely kind of answer the question of the judges, but also direct the conversation to help the judges get all of those rubric questions answered in the best possible light for the team, right? So I think making sure the team is prepared for that. Inevitably, we hear right from teams where they feel like the judges didn't ask the right questions. And it's hard, right? It's hard, even though there's prompts, right? It's tough.
Yeah. And there are times where judges do try to ask those questions that they just don't have enough time because the explanations for something else took too long. So just trying to make sure that you get the information across, but also keep it succinct so that you don't take up the entire 10 minutes or 5 minutes talking about something and you didn't get a chance to talk about something else. I know 10 minutes can feel like a really long time, but it goes by super fast, especially when the kids are in these judging sessions.
So we have another question that says the
Yeah.
robot design rubric seems to cover more about the attachments than the robot itself. What are the judging areas that are related to the robot itself? And I'm looking at the rubric right now, and I only see the word attachment on one line. So I'm not clear,
Yeah.
like it's only on
Um,
this line. So the rest of it is all about the robot, right?
So in some way, you can actually say that attachments are part of the robot. So in essence, when they are talking about an attachment, they are talking about the robot. But you have to look at it as the robot as a body, which is where your control block is with wheels or tracks or something like that on it. And then everything that you add to it that then does all the different things you need it to do to complete all the missions. So attachments are actually part of the robot, and that is also the code is part of the robot after you program it. So being able to kind of talk about each section of the robot, I think is helpful. But yeah, specifically under that create line, we are looking at how their attachments connect to the base, but also how they function. And if they can be used for multiple purposes or if you change it out every time, and sometimes it's best to have multiple attachments or different functions on the robot versus having one attachment or one function that does everything. So that's what we're kind of looking at and um, looking at how you came up with those different ways of doing stuff, really. Hopefully that kind of helped answer.
Yep, I think so. Okay, Uma, I'm going to unmute you, and you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes,
Hi,
yes.
can you hear me? All right, okay. So one of my questions was, how is how's the judging done by the judges on the rubrics? For example, my specific question is that, so will each judge have a separate sheet to themselves and then the scores get combined, or how does that work? Because there's going to be a panel, right?
Yes, so we're aiming still to have 3 judges in the room. One judge will be responsible for filling out basically each piece of paper. So one judge will be looking at the robot rubric. They're responsible for filling it out. Now, once the team leaves, the
Mm-hmm.
judges discuss what those scores should be. So it is a discussion among the judges, and then one person on the judge panel fills out the paperwork. Does that make sense?
Right. Okay. I get it. So if there are
Yeah.
three
One
judges,
one
if there
person
is
one person for each piece of paper, basically, right?
Yeah.
right,
And
because
but it is a discussion among the judges on the scoring of that paper. Um, and so typically what ends up happening too is that we'll get judges from a variety of backgrounds, and some are, engineers, so they tend to kind of more gravitate towards grading the robot side of things.
right,
And then other people with other backgrounds will kind of gravitate towards other areas. Not always true, but that's sometimes how it happens. And then if they are stuck on a score, then all of the judges in the room deliberate and then they come up with a final score amongst them.
sure.
Hopefully,
All right.
does that answer your
Yeah,
question?
that answers my question. I have one more question. Can I ask it now, or
Mhm.
do you want me to?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Uh, all right. Okay. Yeah. So my question was about the awards and the teams that progress to the next round. Is there
Mhm.
a correlation between teams that receive an award and teams that progress to the next round?
Um, a lot of times teams that do win awards do advance, but it is not always a guarantee of winning an award means you're advancing. The only one that I can say is almost basically always guaranteed to advance would be the Champions Award, because that is considered the best team overall for that tournament. So they're kind of the only ones that if you get champions, you're going to the next round of tournaments. But the rest of them, I can't say that that is always going to happen.
And actually next week, I'm going to go through an example
Mhm.
of how advancement works. So I don't want to derail
Mhm.
judging into advancement. So I'll go into
Yeah.
that next week.
All right. Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Thanks a lot.
So we have a couple other questions that came in on the question box. Are the judging sessions in different time slots, or are they all together in one session?
Okay, so you do have a 30-minute session with the judges. And so you go through your innovation project, your robot design, and the judges are also looking at the core values items at the same time. And you have that one 30-minute block. And so you cover everything in that 30-minute block, basically. So when you get your schedule for the day, make sure when you see your judging session come up, you bring everything you want to show the judges for your project and your robot, because that really helps the judges kind of see what you're doing and go from there to help them solidify kind of the evidence that you're showing for your items.
Yeah, and I think they went to this consolidated 30-minute block maybe in 2022, 2021. It's been a couple of years now, right?
Yeah, I think it was 21.
Okay. There's a question that's maybe a little bit more esoteric, not really about the judging process. How do you look for the independence of the judges? So in Northern California, we actually have a fairly strict conflict of interest policy where we do not allow anyone affiliated with a team to be a judge or a judge advisor or referees. So for one thing, every judge should be completely independent and have no affiliation or bias towards or against any team. If you have people that you believe are affiliated with teams that have signed up to judging, please do let me know. I treat this very seriously, and teams have been disqualified and not being able to participate, and all kinds of negative things highlighted as a result of this. So I do treat it very, very seriously, as do all of our tournament directors. So if you do see or feel like there's a lack of independence or unaffiliation with any team, do send me an email. I'm Jill W at Planet Learning. So that one I'm really concerned about that question. The second part of it is, how are judges trained to ensure they are consistent? And then it says it would be great if judges are asked to give positive and productive feedback to be more encouraging. And they said last year it was maybe the judges were distracted, and they're hoping that they'll get a better experience this year. So I'm really sorry that happened last year, but I'll let Carissa handle the other aspects.
Yeah, so the morning, well, before the judges arrive to the tournament, they have a bunch of different training modules that they have to go through to be qualified as a judge. And if they don't complete those before the day of, they can't judge. But also the morning of the tournament, we meet earlier than the judging sessions start, and we go through everything on how to score the rubrics, what to look for when they're going to score a 4, and all of those things. We talk about how to write comments, and we go through all of that. Also, what we do is we do some kind of group we group the judges where we try to have at least one experienced judge in every room, but then we also have them talk to each other and across the different pods, so that way they can kind of get an idea of what everybody thinks a 4 looks like, what they think a 3 looks like, to try to make sure that the scoring is evenly distributed. Something else that the judge advisors do throughout the day is we go over all of the rubrics as they've been filled out, and we look for those slightly, maybe if one room is too liberal on giving fours or too conservative on giving the fours and stuff like that. So we try to make sure that the rooms throughout the day are judging evenly and fairly across the board. So there is a lot of training that kind of goes into that. And it is something that we really do encourage that the judges aren't distracted in the rooms and all of that. And we do tell them when they give the feedback that they need to share something that's positive and something that's negative that they can work on. And I don't really like saying negative because it's not bad. It's just something that wasn't as good as something else. And we do try to get them to write comments so that they can give you guys that constructive feedback so that you can improve for the next time. Yeah, I think that answers the question.
Yep, I think so.
Okay.
Okay, next question. How do teams prepare for that 8 minutes final share and feedback session? That's a good question. That we all
Yeah.
want to know.
So that is going to be basically the judge's time to kind of um, tell the kids, hey, you did a really great job at this, and here's where I think you can improve for next time. A lot of times I do encourage judges to also think like, hey, when my verbal feedback, I also want to write that down so that way the coach sees it because the coach isn't always in the room. Actually, in Northern California, the coach is basically never in the room. And so the kids have a funny memory when it comes to excitement, and they don't always hear exactly what the judge was telling them. So I encourage them, hey, what you share verbally, write that down as well. And then you can add on to it if you think of something after the team leaves to also write down as a positive or feedback for that. I don't know if there's a really good way for teams to prepare other than to kind of have the kids really listen to what the judges are saying during that time frame. And maybe when you guys are practicing with your presentations, having parents or somebody who hasn't seen the presentation yet sit down and kind of pretend to be the judge and then have them share their thoughts and then ask the kids to repeat what that judge or what that person said to them can really help them understand what that feedback is really like.
Yeah, I think the other thing is maybe always having the team, just like in an interview, like if someone gave
Mhm,
you and said, well, tell me a little bit about yourself, right? You should always have something that stands out for the team or unique aspect, right? So
mhm.
if the judges ask, hey, so what haven't we asked? What would you like us to know about you that we haven't asked? Always maybe have something that the team can share that will kind of set them, not necessarily apart, but, make them memorable to the judges. It's always a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay. How strict will the judges stick to the timeline of the flow chart? Do the team have the freedom to distribute presentation between robot design and project differently? Ooh,
Yeah, that's a very good question. So we encourage the judges to try to stick to this flow chart as best as they can. I do understand that timing will vary sometimes. So try to keep your project presentation to that 5 minutes. If it goes over slightly, most judges will allow, like, kind of let them finish up their thoughts or whatever they were doing. But if you're venturing into the 9, 10 minute presentation mark, then the judges will probably cut you off before that. We do want them to be able to have time to answer those questions or like to ask questions, especially if, there is something that isn't quite um, understood in the beginning part of the presentation. With the robot design part, some teams don't actually have like a formal presentation that they give. And so it does become more of a 10-minute Q&A type of thing to kind of get the kids to talk a little bit more about their robot and how they designed it. So there is some flexibility in it, but a lot of times we do try to stick to this so that it keeps the judges on that schedule to get all those rubrics filled out on time and to keep everybody moving on that timeline. Unfortunately, judging is kind of the thing that drives the day's timeline. And we only have so much time to get everything done so that you guys can go home at a reasonable hour.
I think this is a great question as well, because I think the flow chart is confusing. Does the team wait when the judges are completing the rubrics so they can receive it after that 10 minutes at the bottom of the flow chart?
No.
I find this
Yeah.
very confusing. This is actually misworded, I think.
Yeah, so this is really something we hand to the judges themselves. So this flowchart is really for what the judges are doing. When it says team leaves, that means the team leaves, they go back to their pit or to the game table if they have a game round coming up. And then the rubrics will be sent back to the coaches either at the end of the day by the tournament director or emailed out to them at a later date.
We're
So
actually
they will,
hoping, we're hoping, just to interrupt, we're hoping that we can actually get them all uploaded in MyLumi. So both coaches will have access to it, and you'll be able to actually have access to it, like not worry about email, etc. So we're hopeful that we can use MyLumi. I mean, it worked for those who used it last year. It's not a matter of working, it's just a matter of getting them scanned and uploaded into MyLumi in a timely
yeah,
manner. So hopefully that's the process this year.
yeah,
Almost never will it come at the end of the day, and that would be the
true.
earliest that it comes. Yeah,
Yeah.
typically it's a day or
Um,
two after.
yeah. So we try to get them back to you as soon as possible, but it does take us a little bit of time to do it. Um, the judge advisor will actually collect those and then enter them into the OJS or the official judging spreadsheet so that we can look at how to allocate the awards. And then we hold on to those until the tournament is over and we make sure to review them so that we know everything is filled out properly, that you do have comments and feedback and all of that stuff. And then we hand those over to the tournament director or Jill to make sure that they get sent back to you guys.
Yeah, I know we don't have a question on the judge nomination, but we use a slightly different form than the official one. I'm actually
Mhm.
gonna search for it and see if I can pull it up here. We should have a copy that's available, and so I'm gonna go look for it in the background, and I'll be able to share that. And I will, don't know what I just did, but let me do this and move this over. There we go. Having trouble with all my tabs. I've got just a few too many tabs open. So I'm gonna look for that and then I will pull it up. But you need to prepare your team. The team members themselves should be filling this out, not the coach. And as Carissa mentioned, the judge advisor will collect these, and that's usually by 1 o'clock is usually the deadline.
Yeah.
And let me see. This
Um,
is, yeah. So this
yes.
is a copy of last year's, and it'll look very, very similar to this, if not identical. So let me,
Yeah. And it's sometimes it's around 1 o'clock or 1:30 typically when we ask for those submissions back. And part of that reasoning is so that the judge advisor has a chance to read through them all. At some of the tournaments, especially the larger ones with, 20 plus teams. If all the teams actually do turn one in, it's a lot to read through, and we want to make sure that we give appropriate amount of time to be able to read them, but then also select which coach mentor that we think fits the bill.
And
So
there's no rubrics for it,
no,
unfortunately. So
it
it
is.
that's the most frustrating piece of it.
Um, Please also try to have a student with legible handwriting fill it out. We understand that spelling mistakes and grammar mistakes are going to happen, but it's easier if we can actually read it. I've gotten plenty where I can't decipher what words are, so it becomes a lot more challenging.
There's a question that came in about being recorded, and all of our presentations, they're all here on the resource links page. I'm going to post that as well in the chat. So if you haven't seen the robot game one, as I said, next week we have a preparing for your tournament one. So definitely check that out if you haven't. Next question. Do the judges look at a binder if the team wants to show design sketches, brainstorming notes, or test results? So will they look at a binder if the team wants to show that off?
Yes, they will look at it, but please remember to take it with you when you leave. Um, they will not hold on to it. If they do hold on to it, or if the team leaves it in the room, typically the judge advisor will collect it and return it back to the team. We do not hold on to things. We try not to, because there may be personal information or stuff like that in those binders, and we do not want to accidentally dispose of it wrong, in the wrong manner. So we want to make sure that, privacy stuff is taken seriously. And so yes, we will look at the binders. The judges will consider them when they're in the judging sessions, but then just make sure to take them back out of the room. If you forget, we typically do try to return them, but I know sometimes that doesn't always happen.
The other aspect that I would consider is that you want the judges to pay attention while the kids are talking. So if you hand them a binder and say, go look at page 32 for our test results, their heads are going to be down. They're not going to be necessarily as engaged listening to the kids. It would be way better if you had a visual type of thing where there was maybe not on a trifold, but on something that is more visual, that you can say, hey, this is the test results we had, right? And that they're leading the conversation instead of actually handing a binder of stuff and asking the judges to sort of, page by page go through it while the kids are talking. Because as Carissa mentioned, when the team leaves, that binder leaves with the team. The judges will not look at it when the team leaves. So even if they leave it behind, the judges will be directed to not look at that extra material, because it's not fair and not equitable to all of the teams, and there's no time for that. So that binder will go back with the team or be set aside until the next, until the judge advisor comes and picks it up. So, and nothing gets left behind with the judges. So yeah, I don't recommend a binder. I think there's a better way to convey information than a binder. So it's just something to think about.
Like we have somebody with a hand up.
Okay, yep, I navigated away from that. I don't know if you can unmute them.
Yes.
They may be already unmuted. Is that Uma?
Yeah, I think they have to unmute themselves.
Okay. Yeah, so I don't know if you have another question. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah. I think I'm blanking out, so I'll come back again.
Sounds good.
No worries. Yep. So I did post a couple of answers to the question box to all. So those that are on mobile or not able to see those, I'll go ahead and read those out. There was a question about what percentage of teams advance. I'll actually post that out on the Google group once we actually close registration. So the percentage depends on how many teams actually compete. So since registration's still open, I can predict, but I won't know absolutely. So I've already given a Google group message on what I think is the way it's going to be. But I will send a message once qualifier registration is closed to actually set that for sure. So just to answer it, generally we aim for 25 to 30% of teams advancing. And then there was another question about whether the robot game matches are also in a consolidated session or in different time slots. They're in different time slots, but the whole schedule of the day, I'll be talking through that in the preparing for the tournament webinar that's next week. So that's not really a judging question. And then I think I already mentioned around the recording posted out, including this one, as soon as it's available, will be posted out on our resource links page. So those are questions that got answered. And I think not everyone sees those depending on how you log in. So I wanted to get those answered. We don't have any current hands raised, and we don't have any other questions. So this is your time. Otherwise, we can call it if everyone's got their judging questions answered.
Yeah, go ahead, Uma. I think you just need to unmute yourself. Yep.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. So yeah, the question got back to me about the coach nomination form. Who can fill the form, and is only one form allowed per team?
Yeah, so one form per team. It should be the students filling it out. If they need help filling it out because none of them have legible handwriting yet, an adult can help them write it out, but it should be the students doing it. And if we get multiple forms handed in, the last one handed in will be the one that is considered, not the previous ones. But please only submit one. It makes it a lot easier.
Got it. Thank you.
Mhm.
One of the interesting things about the Coach Award Mentor Award is it's that and the Robot Design, or excuse me, Robot Performance Award. Those two awards are are awards that a team could win either or both of those, along with one of the other 4 judged awards. So in general, judges will only give one award to a team. So you would, even if you were up in first place for both project and core values, for example, you would only win one of those 2 awards. And likely if you were up for that, you would probably actually win champions. So generally, if you're up for multiple awards. But let's just say there's a couple of teams that are all, way high up there, and you were up for, you would have won, if there wasn't this notion, you would have won more than one judged award. So for example, core values and project, you will not, you will exactly win one award, and the judges will decide which one. Robot performance is separate, so a team could win a judged award, such as Core Values Award, and a Robot Performance Award, as well as a Coach Mentor Award. So Coach Mentor Award is not considered a team award, and Robot Performance Award is also considered separate. So those are I wish they would do a better job of describing this on this award list. They don't actually mention that, but those 2 awards, Robot Performance and Coach Mentor, are ones that a team could win. So a team could walk away, for example, with 3 trophies. It would be very rare, and I think rare is probably the best word, but it is possible that they win for example, a judged award, robot performance award, and a coach mentor award. You know, it would not be impossible to do that. We try not to have that happen, but the judges don't consider performance or coach mentor award, for example, when they're evaluating core values, for example. Like, they only are looking at the rubric. So if you're up for core values, it's because that rubric or the questions from project and core robot design that were relevant to core values scored you in the highest area. It'll be interesting to see now this year with the different rubrics whether we have more high performing core values teams as a result of these double counting rows that count for both, for example, project and core values, or robot design and core values. So it'll be interesting to see the statistics on that. I'm very curious how that will play out.
Just be prepared for maybe a slightly longer deliberation period in the afternoon. If that does happen, judges will do their best to keep to the timeline. That's what us judge advisors are there for. But we sometimes really have to practice and flex those time management skills to keep everybody on schedule.
Yeah, that's the hardest part for sure.
Mhm. So we do appreciate all of your patience at the very end of the day when everybody is tired and ready to go home.
Uma, you have another question?
Yes. Um, the 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 scores for professionalism, graceful professionalism, I guess, count
Mhm.
towards the core values. And
Yes,
those, I believe, come from the referees
yes.
on what happens on the ground.
Mhm.
So, like, do those scores come from the referees, or do you also have judges present during the games?
Nope. Those come from the referees.
Okay,
And then the referees are looking at what the team is doing while they're at the field. They mark it onto this, and that number gets reported back to the judge advisor, who then makes sure it gets entered into the correct part of the spreadsheet. So that way it's counted for appropriately. But yeah, those do come from the referees.
right. And okay, so those kind of get aggregated at the end of the day, or judges, the referees are sending the scores to the judge advisor as and when the games happen.
So
So
the
it
judge,
depends. Yeah.
yeah, the judge advisor typically will collect the robot performance score, GP scores, a couple times throughout the day. So that way they can make sure that their spreadsheet is up to date and that they keep it up to date throughout the day. And then that all gets basically put together at the end of the day to figure out all of the awards.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, some of the events this year are going to do online scoring. So it's a web browser based through MyLumi called Event Day. In those cases, the judge advisor will actually have immediate access to both the score, which counts for the Champions Award, or rank actually, which counts, the actual score doesn't, it's the rank, as well as the GP score from the field. They'll have that access immediate. If it's paper forms, then it's more of multiple times a day the judge advisor will get those. The refs are generally scoring a 3, so their training will say the you should start at a 3, and then if the team is struggling and having some issues either in teamwork or how they're communicating, some challenges, not with the robot, but how their behavior towards that, then they might score a 2. If they are doing things in the opposite direction, they might get an exceeds, but that is up to the referee. So that will come, based on the behavior at the robot game from the referee.
Thank you.
Yep. We've just got a couple minutes left in our hour. I don't see any new questions come in the question box. Don't see any hands raised. So we'll give it another minute or two, and then we can call it a great session. Thank you so much, Carissa, for answering everything. We're excited for the events coming up, for sure.
I'm also looking forward to it. It will be a very fun, fast few weeks.
Yeah, we have 2 the first weekend, 9 the second weekend, and 9 events the third weekend. So it'll go very fast. Boom, boom, boom. And then it's Thanksgiving and Christmas, and then and then the new year.
And then it's FRC season.
Yes, yeah. And our championships and spring
Mhm.
league eventually, and then a new season begins, right? It all goes together.
Yeah.
And last
Uma?
question.
Yep, go.
All right, thank you so much. So I'm looking at the sheet that you are projecting right now. As per the rubric, the rating can be 1, 2, 3, or 4, and I'm looking at, say, the first, the first element,
Mhm.
which is the identify, and it has 6 boxes under it.
Yeah.
So, is the how does the scoring happen? What are these boxes for? And no, I see one,
So
two, three,
so
four,
basically each
8 boxes.
row becomes a score. So that first row that Jill just highlighted, that
Mm-hmm.
is one score. So you'll get either a 1, 2, 3, or 4 in that row. And it'll be the same for the other 9 rows that are below it. So you'll have 10 total numbers for robot design and for project. Now the ones that have the little like flower around it that almost make it look like a sun, those then are also counted towards core values scores. And I believe there are 5 or so per robot and per project that then get translated over. It might be a little bit more than that. I don't remember counting explicitly. Yeah, it looks like it's 5 per page. So that way you have a basically 10 total numbers that will then go in to find your overall robot design score. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. So the
Okay.
ones with the flower or the sun sign, those are the
Yep.
scores that'll count towards your core values.
Yes.
I heard you mention those will also count towards core values. Does that mean that that score is double counted, like it's getting counted in this sheet, and as well as in the core values?
Correct. It will be counted towards robot and like your robot design and towards your core values score, which is why Joe mentioned a little earlier that we may have more ties for teams that do well in robot and project that will also do well in core values, which makes deliberations maybe a little bit different this year than in previous years.
Hmm. Right.
So
Okay.
yeah,
Okay. That
maybe
that that helps. The last column is empty, and
yeah,
could you explain about that too? Thank you.
sure.
Sorry.
So no, you're good. So with a 4, what we don't give explicit guidelines for what a 4 means, whereas we give kind of more clear understanding of what a 3, 2, or 1 means. And basically, it's because we want the judges to be able to really detail why the team exceeds or goes above and beyond in that category specifically. So those blank boxes are actually for the judges to fill in a comment as to why you got that 4. And we do explicit training on what qualifies as a 4, how to write those comments, and all of that. So if you get a 4, you should see detailed information on it. It may not be on the front because that box is really small. So it may say like see back, and then on the back of the paper we'll have more detailed notes. Now, if these do get scanned into MyLumi, that might be a second page or something of that nature. So just make sure that you kind of look for those if you do see a 4 marked. That is one of the things that, as a judge advisor, what we do is we make sure that those, if a 4 is marked, that the comments are there and that they qualify it as a 4.
Yeah, it's not just, for example, clear evidence of missing strategy. It's not just, oh, they were, crystal clear on their strategy. It's over and above in multiple, and way beyond what a 3 is, right? So there are certain, it's usually pretty rare, and I don't think I've ever seen a team get all 4s. I don't think that's even occurred even at the World Championship or World Festival kind of
Yeah.
experience in April. Like it is really hard to get 4s. Most teams will get a 2 or a 3. Some rookie teams or teams that are maybe started a little bit later maybe get more some 1s, but most of the teams at a qualifier will get 2s and 3s. That'll be the general average.
And these sheets are available on First Inspires. So if you know where like the game material stuff is, they are listed there. So you have a chance to go and review them, look them up, and actually see them before you go to tournament. If you have that chance. And you can even use them as a kind of a learning tool when you're doing presentations. If you want, you can, get a couple of them and then have a couple parents maybe write out what they think that, the score should be, kind of gives you a baseline maybe. But they are available, so please do take a look at them prior to coming to the tournaments.
And I can put a plug in here right at the end. If you go to our homepage, NorCal FLLC, you scroll down, we have a social site, and there's actually a team running a judging practice session. So FRC team 3501 is actually going to run a practice judging format. So you can read more here, sign up. I know that they still have openings. There's also some scrimmages that are posted. So if you go into local events, there are 2 scrimmages that are posted. So definitely the social site is where all of that is. And again, it's available right here on our homepage. So definitely check that out if you are worried about judging and want some feedback. That's a great opportunity. At time, thank you so much, Carissa. I know I really appreciate all that you do for Northern California. And if you see Carissa at a tournament, which I know she's got quite a few on her dance card this season, definitely say hi and thank you for running tonight's session. And with that, we're going to call it an evening. Thanks so much, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
I'm going to exit and end the webinar.